Okay, sounds like we're live, and so I'm joined by Ted Hulsy, CRO at SnapTech. And would you mind just giving a quick intro as we enter the MSP Experience Lounge on this live stream?
Yeah, so it's great to be here. I'm Ted Hulsy with SnapTech IT. I head up sales and marketing at our organization. We're what I would consider kind of a medium-sized MSP. When we talk to clients and prospects, we talk about being a cybersecurity first managed service provider. And we have operations in Atlanta, Georgia, Phoenix, Arizona, and San Francisco, California. And we're about 43 employees, and we've been in business approaching 20 years.
Excellent. Cool.
Yep.
We were just catching up, and so you had a prior gig as head of marketing at eFolder, currently now Axcient. So thanks for keeping the chair warm for me and for the neon sign that passed over. Kidding. This is a new element to marketing for us, but we have this really cool intersection, and you've been on many sides of the fence of marketing, and you're just an expert, and we're so just thrilled to dive in. But before we get into like the meat of it, what have you been seeing? What have you been experiencing lately on the marketing front? What are MSPs talking to you about in the realm of sales marketing?
Yeah, I mean, I think I fortunately am in a couple different peer groups. So I'm on an IT Nation Evolve owners peer group, where we get together once a quarter with other MSP business owners. And I'm also on the IT Nation Evolve Sales Exec peer group, which is all sales and marketing professionals who are doing the sales and marketing craft inside of an MSP. Yeah, I mean, everybody's obsessed with growth. I mean, I think that's where you have to be. I mean, I think in the owners groups, it's always a much more holistic conversation where it's growth plus profitability plus legacy and the whole M&A dynamics that are going on in the industry. That's a huge topic all the time because many business owners are thinking strategically about, when they might exit their organization and move on to the next stage of their life, and combine with another, merge or sell the organization to somebody else. So that's a big topic on the owners groups. And then in the sales and marketing world, yeah, it's everybody's just focused on how do we win new clients, how do we drive more value for existing clients, and how do we evolve their IT. And it's a super exciting time, I would say. The whole generative AI revolution really is really top of mind by everybody. And I would say the MSP industry, I think, is still grappling with how to turn it into a massive business opportunity, but it is a massive business opportunity. And so that's definitely something we're talking about a lot.
Great. And so that's your view, that's your flag in the ground. And just as a reminder to everyone, this is the MSP Experience Lounge. Kick your feet up. This is your hour of, you're working hard. You're doing so much for your business. This is your chance just to soak it in, ask us questions, enter the conversation. We'll be threading your questions in throughout the full talk. And Ted is the expert. And yeah, so Ted, it's a massive opportunity. We're still grappling with it, still new. What have you seen? What are some quick wins, small wins? What do you think?
Yeah, I would say that probably 12 to 16 months ago, I was a little bit bearish on Copilot. Microsoft's foray into the AI world. Of course, ChatGPT and OpenAI's just rocket ship like adoption by people was pretty astounding, and the way the tech immediately just compelled people to just start doing things differently, and the whole ecosystem that built up around it was clearly amazing. I think in the early days, I personally was a little bit dubious whether Microsoft would be able to rapidly productize this technology in the Microsoft 365 suite. But I've been blown away. We've been using Copilot inside of SnapTech for probably about 6 months now, and it's just the technology is a huge game changer, number one. And just for all the MSPs out there, I would say that you have to be leaning in hard on this technology and figuring out ways to productize it in your offering, and you just own the conversation with your market. Your market is going to have burning questions about this technology. How do you responsibly deploy AI? How do you do it in a secure fashion? Who's going to help me look around corners and avoid pitfalls? How am I going to drive value? How am I going to drive adoption? These are all the things that an MSP can really help end user organizations tackle. And this is one of those big tech waves that the MSP industry needs to fully embrace. And that's the opportunity. And to me, what we've seen is anytime we do any sort of marketing whatsoever, if it involves AI, we get 3x the attention. We get 3x the opens, we get 3x the clicks, we get 3x the registrants for the webinars. It's a little bit like shooting fish in a barrel, a little bit in terms of getting people's attention. Now you have to land that with high quality content and sound advice and good like a good business path and journey for your clients. But from a marketing perspective, you've got to latch onto the AI momentum and opportunity right now. That's my take, at least.
Great. So for those just starting out, you just pitch the idea, hey, if you're not doing this yet as an MSP, if you're not ingraining AI into your offerings, into your talk tracks, into your content, into your presence, which we're going to talk about, you've got a bunch of amazing ideas in terms of community involvement and just how you really get the word out and do sales and marketing. Then from which point would they start? Where would they get going? How would they get that first level of mastery to feel confident to then do that webinar, do that promotion, that email around AI, to then offer it just to take advantage of the groundswell of interest in this?
Yeah, I mean, I would say a couple things. Number one, you just have to, if you're getting a little stale in your technical curiosity, you've got to shelve that quickly and get engaged. I think everybody can get kind of exhausted by the rate of change that goes on in our world, and sometimes you can get a little complacent. And on this one, on AI, I would say that just you gotta get engaged, because it's funny, everyone says like, well, AI's the only people AI is going to put out of a job is the people who are not adopting AI, right? It's like AI is not going to eliminate jobs per se. It's just it's turbocharging and giving such a huge advantage from a productivity perspective to people who are leveraging it. So you've got to master it. So I just think all business owners and leaders, you've got to have like a personal agenda to get educated on the tech. You've got to be using it in your day-to-day work. There's a ton of sales and marketing. I mean, we're talking about sales and marketing mostly today, and there's a ton of productivity things that you can do with AI that are just astounding in terms of boosting your personal productivity. So I would, at least bare minimum, you should be subscribed to the premium ChatGPT product offering. You should be, exploring different alternative platforms. We're using the ChatGPT premium offering. We're using something called Jasper, which is a marketing centric SaaS tool that leverages large language models and specifically OpenAI. We have, all of our executive and leadership team on Copilot for about the past 5 months. So those are examples of us leaning into the tech and trying to use it day to day. And several of us are, every day, like we literally have a ChatGPT tab open. We have tons of our marketing things we're doing right now. We're leveraging AI in developing copy, developing images for seminars, workshops, and webinars we're doing, having it bootstrap us to Copilot to create PowerPoint presentations. I mean, man, if you haven't used Copilot total killer app. It's like, Copilot can create a PowerPoint for you and bootstrap you to like 70 or 80% of what you need in a PowerPoint presentation. Those are a couple things people should do. And then I would just start doing marketing initiatives where you're educating your clients and prospects on AI. Right. Webinars, blogs, local seminars. If you have opportunities in local business community events, chamber events, Vistage, EO. If there's opportunities where you can be invited as an expert or a speaker, make it about AI, because that's what people are interested in. Make it practical. try to make sure you level set the technical complexity of your talk to your audience, but make it practical and give people practical advice on steps they can take to get started. So those are a couple ideas I think that MSP leaders should be doing day to day to embrace
Excellent.
the opportunity.
Sounds like a virtuous circle of you get the benefit of using it and turbocharging your own business with it, and then at the same time learning it and then being able to turn that around into a service. So I know for some, if AI is your topic du jour or exciting or scary or whatever, I'd be interested in that next phase of what you talked about of the touch points. We're going to start talking about community, about we talk about MSP community a ton here, obviously, but about the touch points and how no matter what marketing you're doing and what topics you're doing, what are those touch points? What are the best levers for it? Could you talk more about sort of what you've seen work, what membership associations, what either content and media and medium pairing works really well in terms of virtual events, webinars, in person, things like that?
Yeah, I mean, I would say that the thing that I get asked a lot is, kind of what's working sales and marketing wise in the MSP marketplace today. And yeah, I mean, I think at SnapTech, we're very convicted around developing local centers of influence in the business communities where you operate. The interesting thing about the MSP business is that 95% of the work we do for clients is all done remotely today. I mean, when you onboard a new client, you're going to go refresh networks and refresh servers and deploy PCs and that sort of thing. But like day to day, 95% of the work we do is remote. And so you could theoretically, it's like, why is it such a local business? And the answer is the buyer wants it to be local. Like right. despite so the traditional buyer in that kind of sweet spot between 20 employees and 100 employees is usually a business owner or principal or partner in a firm, and even though maybe I don't think they realize how much of the tech allows us to do what we do remotely. Right. And a lot of people kind of have like these nightmare days where like the printer broke and can I get somebody across town to like fix it, or a server crashed. I mean, I think people have kind of like, there's a lot of baggage
of course
around on-premises IT infrastructure failing or products failing, and the desire to have somebody local. But today, most stuff happens remote, but the buyer still wants a local experience. And so that's kind of just one of the things if you're trying to, I mean, it seems obvious to people. I mean, to me, I had to kind of have a wake-up call on that because a huge part of my career was spent on the vendor side. Mm-hmm. And when I was with Axcient or when I was with SonicWall, we're thinking in terms of nationwide markets. A software company or technology providers thinking of nationwide markets or global markets. And so literally your customers and partners can be almost anywhere. Right. You really have to totally reframe your thinking when the buyer wants a service provider that's local. So we're hyper local, and we believe that the best thing that business leaders and owners at MSPs can do is to really cultivate local centers of influence, places where your buyers aggregate or congregate. Where do they get together and rub elbows? And where can you build up your local brand, your brand as an expert in technology, and where can you provide real value in terms of content and programming? And so the practical examples would be EO, which is an entrepreneurial organization, Vistage, which is a CEO, a growth-oriented CEO group, YPO, which is Young Presidents Organization, Provisors is another one, even BNI, is another one. I mean, there's local business communities where you can go in and invest time and invest your expertise in the conversation to try to help other business leaders grow in their understanding of technology and how technology can help their businesses. And if you do that, you're going to organically develop a brand and reputation and organically generate a lot of inbound interest. So that's something that we really believe in. It's hard to scale that motion to account executives and people who have maybe been in the industry only 2 to 5 years, because a lot of the business owners have been doing this for 20 years. So it's a lot easier for them to kind of establish that reputation in the community. But you almost, as you grow, you need to have a whole team of people who are doing this motion. And that's probably the more complicated thing. And for us right now, that's where we're trying to get better is, how do we have sales professionals have the same sort of gravitas or kind of clout in a local community that a business owner, a president, or a CEO would have.
Right.
Because that's the way to scale it, is you need like a small army of people doing this every day.
Not a single person.
To get more than your fair share of business. And having only your CEO do it, that just won't work if you try to grow at a double-digit rate.
Well, that's interesting. There's a good question in the chat, which I want to get to, but I think this point is really salient. I mean, you made the great point about scale and growth and hyper growth. We've talked about hyperlocalization. We've talked about sort of the brand of the individual, the MSP principal, the owner, maybe the head of services. There's usually that one person who's sort of like the face of the brand, and that will only carry so far. And so talk more about how that transition can be made. How can you really parallel process this so that other folks can go to multiple engagements, multiple communities, multiple touch points, rather than just it's a very single threaded kind of machine in terms of the brand being singular to one person?
Yeah, I think there's a couple things to say. I mean, I think one, those of you who are either CEOs or presidents, I think there's what I've seen in the marketplace is that, when somebody founds their company, there's usually a lot of sales and marketing energy that goes into the first, 5 to 10 years of the company's growth. And then invariably, we're all humans. We get to a certain level of success and we're like, man, I'm working all the time. I need to take a little bit of a break. And what a lot of MSP CEOs do is they back off. Mm-hmm. They back off that sort of really aggressive kind of networking and local business development they were doing in the early years. So check yourself. Is that you? Look in the mirror. Is that you? Because that does happen. So I see that quite a bit. And it's not to say that like, oh, well, you've got to get back in that mode in the first those kind of hours you were putting in the first 3 years. What you want to do is try to kind of think about different ways different people in the chain of command can engage with the local community. Right. So first of all, check yourself. Have you taken the foot off the gas, and do you need to get re-engaged? And so for a lot of, I've been on MSP peer groups for years, and I've seen kind of the ups and downs of success. And I can guarantee you a huge part of it's effort. If you used to be on the speaking circuit and used to be hitting the chambers circuit, and you used to be like putting yourself out there to be as a guest speaker, and then you look at your calendar the past 24 months and you're like, well, I really haven't done any free speaking events. That's on you. That's on you. And look in the mirror and just double check that, are you still putting in the level of effort that you should? Now, if you are, and you've now are building out a professional sales organization, and you might have a business development rep or an account executive in market, the other dimension of these local center of influence communities is there's a lot of really labor intensive work that needs to happen in these communities. There's lots of first of all, there's opportunities to not just be like the CEO member of the local community. You can also sponsor it. So one of the big challenges with these local center of influence communities like Vistage or EO is sometimes there's a prohibition against promoting your own business. Right. So the idea is you're here as a CEO to develop yourself as a CEO. Okay, great. But you're not here to promote your business. Okay, great. But there are opportunities to be a sponsor of the local community. So I totally endorse that. Right. So that's a way to help get the rest of your sales and marketing team involved in going out there and engaging with the rest of the CEOs that are in that local community. That's one thing. And then there's just a lot of labor intensive work that needs to happen. So what you want to do is continue to have the CEO or president have that kind of clout where they're the expert you put in charge, but to have your account executive and your local sales team be the ones who are working the trade show booth, making it to all the happy hour events, looking for different sponsorship opportunities that can get your brand in front of the rest of the audience, and doing a lot of the more labor-intensive business development work that's local. But I think it's a teaming approach where you want to have the CEO and presidents being like the thought leader, and then you want kind of a small team below them who's actually doing a lot of the labor-intensive local networking work and local, trade show type event work that goes on.
Right. Just really filling out the potential capacity of really touching the community as much as possible. I love that flowchart idea that you gave. It's just look at yourself in the mirror. Obviously a lot of owners, principals are used to working 60, 70 hour plus weeks to start. And so it's not a critical thing of like, hey, are you letting your foot off the gas? But at some point, how do you want to balance your imperatives here? Do you want to be in the community? Have you been doing that before? Now you've taken your foot off the gas in that realm. Maybe you've been focusing on other things. And so you're going to suffer the sort of result of that. But if that is okay, and then things are running well, then how do you get to the next level? How do you really allow more surface area to kind of permeate the community? The good question, which dovetails right off of this, is, so what are those wasted efforts? If those principles have been pedaled to the metal for a while, and they probably built up over time, as we all do, just sort of things that aren't actually producing the Pareto 80-20 rule or others, things that are not producing a ton of value, but we're sort of stuck in and we're doing this out of routine. How do you look at marketing that's not effective? How do you really peer into that and just shut off a bunch of things that aren't productive to then enable yourself to really do the most high impact work?
Well, I would say two things. Like the first is triple check your ideal client profile, your ICP or TCP. Right. And the second is get more metric driven in measuring your marketing results. So first on TCP, ICP, I think I was just looking on Facebook last night. I saw a really good debate around BNI networking groups. And BNI networking groups, they're fairly controversial, right? I think there's tons and tons of BNI local groups. The big problem with a lot of BNI groups is that the typical, it feels good. You're out networking, you're out doing local business development. So it feels good. And there are MSP business owners who I just spoke to a gentleman, from the Bay Area the other day, and he's like, hey, the first 10 years of my business, BNI was my go-to networking thing, and I built this company on BNI. He said that, right? And at this point, though, he feels like he's outgrown it. But what I saw in this conversation last night on Facebook was that the big challenge with like some networking groups or some local community engagement is the decision maker of your ideal client actually engaged in the community where you're spending time?
Correct.
And with BNI, I think oftentimes that's not the case. I mean, the sweet spot for most MSPs is like 10 computer users, 20 computer users, 30 computer users. And the average company in BNI is like 5 to 10 employees. So it's like, it's the wrong target. That you're spending time, the buyers aren't there. So I would say that if you're trying to like sharpen the pencil a little bit and be a little bit more specific about what's working, what's not, and where you should be spending your time, triple check your ICP and stop spending time in areas where your ideal client is not spending time, or the decision makers of your ideal clients not spending time. That's the first thing. Second is be more metric driven. Try to understand, okay, we're doing this community, we're spending this much money in this community. How many trackable leads and appointments and closed new client wins have we gotten from this community effort in the past 12 months? And try to just be steely-eyed about it. And we're like, I just was having this discussion with our company president, and who's my boss, and we're a work in progress because we're like not as metric driven in certain areas as we would like. But you really need to get more metric driven and understand and bucketize what are the different areas you're investing money and time. And time is your biggest, in most MSPs, the biggest sales and marketing effort is time investment. Not necessarily ad dollars for Google AdWords or advertising or whatever. It's mostly time. Where are you spending the time and the dollars? And then what output are you getting? And I find in a lot of MSPs, that's way too, muscle and feel and way too imprecise. So try to get the spreadsheet out, try to do a 12-month look back, try to bucketize where you're spending that money and time, and then then track that back to the deals and the MQLs, the marketing qualified leads, and the appointments you're getting. And if certain things aren't working, cut it, change, right, adapt, right, and always have like an R&D agenda where you're trying something new. Right. I mean, I think I often get frustrated where, somebody says, well, that's not working. I'm like, well, it's kind of working. It's not working perfectly. Let's not like kill it. Let's maybe this one other thing is definitely not working. Let's cut that. And then let's right, add an R&D. Right. Let's add an R&D initiative to try something totally brand new. Right. It's usually not, it's something should be very wrong if you're like every 6 months completely 100% chucking the whole strategy out the window and trying something new. Mm-hmm. Right. You should have like 2 or 3 things you're doing, and one is usually on the struggles list, and you want to be cutting that one and then adding something new.
Yep. Love it. And I swear we did not sync on this in the pre-call or anything to just align 100% hyper-focus, but this is exactly my whole approach to marketing. And, you get your 2x2 window of your cash cows, the things that are absolutely killing it, and like no brainer, like you have the attribution, it's working, and you fold in these experimentations, R&D, in this case, in the sales and marketing sense of your experimenting as part of your portfolio of motions that you're going through. And a lot of those end up being the future cash cow and the future winners because you hadn't tried them before. You didn't have the signals. You didn't know. You tried them, and lo and behold, wow, this is a big untapped thing of this user group or that virtual event type or this automated email sequence or content. And it will go up, and other things, fall down. And you run the same. Marketing is always a cat and mouse game, as we know. And so you keep running the same thing over and over and over again. And last year's cash cow, or this, top window over here on the 2x2, kind of falls off. At some point, it just needs to be shown the door and get out of the portfolio. So I absolutely love that. I mean, you answer the question perfectly. If you don't mind, I would like to use Austin Pownell's question. If you're so we've talked a lot about kind of from bootstrapping and from the ground up, if you're not ready to do all these whiz bang AI things, if you had the benefit of being able to start from scratch in this day and age, how would you start from scratch? With that ICP, which love that. We'll definitely upvote the triple check your ICP statement, which is incredible. You have your ICP, you have a clear business focus, you have a clear positioning and a clear differentiator and a clear value proposition. If you're just starting out, what would be your approach? Are there particular events that you would target? How would you balance the work as a principal that needs to be done at the business level versus the sales and marketing growth initiative?
Yeah, I mean, I guess we've talked at length about local centers of influence. So I think no matter how big you are, big or small you are, I think until you're like until you're like maybe a $50 million MSP, like, and having like a nationwide footprint, like local centers of influence marketing has to be like, is got to be in the top 3 for any MSP executive team. So I don't think that changes when you go from 500,000 up to 50 million. I don't think that changes. I think it's up there. So I think we have that established, right? So even if you're small and you're starting out, you need to develop your local center of influence. I think the next conversation we should have is really around content. Mm-hmm. And the thing that I am always astounded by is, how infrequently MSP business owners and leaders share their knowledge. Like that is absolutely the best marketing. If you can become a go-to resource in your local community on social media as like a local celebrity who knows everything about tech and how to help people with tech, that is just it's not free marketing because you do need to you need to invest time to create compelling content. But it is probably the sort of marketing that has the most leverage when you're small.
Correct.
Because the astounding thing is you look around at your competition and so many people are just, they underestimate how much they know, number one, and they underestimate how helpful they can be if they just would share a little more generously of their advice and their knowledge. And let's just break it down. What are we talking about? We're talking about blogging. Every MSP should have a robust blogging initiative. Right now, we're blogging once a week. All right.
Okay.
And probably, for a 43-person MSP, we were debating a year or two ago about like, hey, maybe we should blog twice a month. And now we're blogging once a week. All right. So that's big progress. But so even if you're smaller, you should have like, okay, maybe you blog twice a month. You should have a social media presence, and you should be engaging in conversations. You can participate. You can become a guest in other people's podcasts.
Absolutely.
Like that's something you can do. You can put together, like, here's a kind of a no-brainer. Like, all the local chambers, the Rotary organization, the chambers, all these local communities, the thing that they are always desperate for is content. Like they have a lot of programming that they need to do. And if they can bring in an expert who could give, hey, the top 7 things all business owners need to worry about cybersecurity in 2024, like any MSP business owner could pull that PowerPoint presentation together. With Copilot and ChatGPT, you can have ChatGPT develop 80% of the content for you, or Copilot develop 80% of the content for you and do the heavy lifting. You just need to come in and show up, present the slides, and provide your expertise, because you're down in the trenches day to day, seeing the realities of what a cyber breach does to an organization. You have the war stories. You got to get out there and tell those stories. So I just would encourage business owners to not underestimate themselves, number one. Know that you know a ton. There's a reason your brother-in-law and your cousins and your sister call you when they have technical problems. You know how to solve problems. Widen the net and embrace your local community and give people free advice on how to handle this really complex and like scary world for a lot of people. Like the rate of technological change that comes at people are scared and overwhelmed. Try to be that Sherpa, that guide for people in your local community. You're their Sherpa on this technical journey, and try to just be, produce more than your fair share of, more than your fair share of content that you can then provide to your marketplace. And then, find ways to get the word out. Social media, your local center of influence work, and then, maybe have somebody on staff who really enjoys social media, then you do need to then start thinking about, okay, well, how do I more proactively get the word out? I've created this content. How do I get eyeballs to it?
Right.
You could tiptoe your way into that. You could have one person on your staff who's maybe like a junior marketing person in training, who 20% of their monthly time, they could be sending out emails in HubSpot and doing your social media posts. Like that's a way to like crawl, walk, run in terms of this content initiative. But what you have to start doing is having the confidence we talked about, and then start producing content, just writing, giving advice, putting together, white papers or buyer guides or, tech tip sheets, blogs, etc. And so that's the content content is king in B2B marketing, I think.
That's right.
And I think a lot of people overthink it.
Right. You're educating them. I love everything you just said. So I can't add to it, but just to summarize it, to constantly be producing value, and you're half educating the market and you're half really fulfilling a need. I feel like, I usually use car examples and car metaphors, but this to me is like a sailing metaphor, which I'm not exactly adept at. But the winds of change, the tides and the winds are all about cyber crime. This wasn't such a hot button issue. It wasn't such a known entity. It's such a driving force for end users, for SMBs, for local businesses, for medium, large scale businesses 10, 20 years ago. Now is the time. We're seeing it every day. The news cycle is constantly this AT&T leak and this thing and that other thing happening every single day. The wind is blowing. And if you can just take the time to build a sail and just hoist it up, and with your content and saying, hey, I'm the guy in your network, in your community, who's an expert who can help you, the wind is just going to push you along. Like you have everything you need. You do have to put in the work though to get that boat set right and to hoist up the sail. If you don't mind, I'll take a quick station break. Danielle Goddard asked, do these recordings get posted anywhere? Yes, Danielle, on YouTube. We have at the Axcient YouTube channel, we have a whole playlist of all of the MSP Experience lounges, always there on demand for free, obviously. And the MSP Game Changers series, hosted by none other than Robert Chaffee, who I'll talk about later because we're doing a roundtable next week. But I saw, Ted, when I looked at your LinkedIn profile, and Robert Chaffee had a praise to you or a recommendation on your LinkedIn profile. I know that you've worked with him a ton. And so just a friend of the community and someone in here. But yeah, just a quick plug for the YouTube channel. We in this exact vein of thinking, we put that out there as valuable content that we want to help people with. We want to just make it available. And we're practicing what we preach, exactly what you're talking about, Ted.
Yeah, and just a thought about Robert that kind of pivots a little bit off of the conversation we were just having around content. Robert is a guy, so he's a principal in an MSP in Yonkers, New York. If you follow the Axcient brand, he's very involved in contributing to content for the company, and the company has been a big helper to his business because the business continuity solutions of Axcient were like critical when his firm suffered a cyber breach. But something about Robert with content is Robert is what I would call a go-giver. Mm-hmm. And there's a book, if you haven't read the book, it's a book by Bob Berg, I think is the author, but it's a book all about how you want to be not a go-getter in the business world, you want to be a go-giver. You want to be somebody who contributes. And Robert is somebody who's always contributing to the MSP community out there and giving great advice. Just a couple weeks ago, I was trying back to this conversation of like, how do you train young sales professionals and how to be good at local business networking? And I mean, Robert doesn't know I'm sharing this, that I had him on, but I asked him to just join me for a Teams call with my sales team where he talked about what he's been doing in Yonkers, in New York for the past 20 years in his career to develop his local community. And he's a go-giver. He's giving content, advice, and wisdom. And that's what that's what we were talking about earlier. In your local market, you got to be perceived as a go-giver of good content and advice for that local market. And then you'll become magnetic in terms of leads and your brand reputation for your MSP business.
Love it.
So check out Robert.
He is a go-giver in the community, in peer groups. I know we haven't named names just yet, but you're in IT Nation Evolve, and he is as well. And that avenue for him with the MSP 911, I may be messing up the URL, but this rescue program that he's helped to co-found with others in conjunction with CompTIA, like all of his work in the community, it's that go-giver mentality, which is exactly what you're saying. You can do it MSP to MSP, you can help within peer groups, and you can do it in your community to be that trusted advisor, that real technical expert for just this wave of ransomware, cybercrime, worries, data movements to the cloud, everything that people that business owners are losing sleep over. You can be that person, but it does take you, having the gumption to get out there, speak with authority, and really plant a flag in the ground in the sense of like the content that you want to make, right?
That's right.
Cool. To move on, there's been so many amazing tips on what to do. What are some common things that you see people spinning their wheels on? Things that they're doing that's probably like, let's just call it out and call a spade a spade. Like, what are the most often things that you see that people are doing that are probably pretty ineffective, but out of routine or out of whatever, lack of attribution, lack of data, to your point?
I would say that one mistake I often see is that kind of when an MSP gets to that kind of $1 to $3 million a year range, it's like they've been through that. They've run the gauntlet where you as the business owner or founder needed to like really carry a lot of the water on the marketing front. And then you're like, wow, we've actually got cash flow coming in. We've got a stable workforce. This is great. We're winning a couple new accounts a year. Churn's under control. Like, let's go spend $150,000 on Google AdWords.
Right.
And we're like, well, and trust me, I mean, some of you need to look in the mirror. That's you. This happens a lot where I see MSPs in that kind of $1 to $3 million range where they get a certain level of success, and then they're like, oh man, we got marketing budget, let's go spend it. And they go spend it on 2 or 3 like really expensive experiments, and it just fails miserably.
Right.
And the thing I just would like to say, I think for the MSPs that are in that size range, is think sales before marketing.
100%.
Because to me, you really need to do 2 things on the sales front. You've got to refine your sales process, number 1, and make sure it's thoroughly documented and well understood and is scalable. I mean, if it's, first of all, a process is not a process unless it's written down. If you don't have an SOP or a flow chart or different milestones, you don't really have a sales process, right? So to be honest with yourself, do I have a sales process? So get your sales process clarified, because you don't want to go start throwing a bunch of fuel on the fire on the marketing front if you don't actually have a good process to process the leads that come in. And I've been there. For several years, I ran a sales and marketing consulting firm focused on MSPs. And sometimes we would have a good client who we were doing great marketing for. We were driving webinars and doing their blogging and doing lunch and learn events and that sort of thing. And then we would come out of these events and hand all the leads to the MSP business owner. And he was the only salesperson. And all the leads would get dropped on the ground. Nothing would happen. Calls would not be made. And so don't do that. Don't do that, because don't hire a marketing agency. Don't go dump a bunch of dollars on a marketing program. Don't go start investing serious budget in marketing unless you've got the sales process well understood and you're starting that crawl, walk, run process of building a professional sales organization that is going to give you, the business owner, extra scale. Now, there's a lot of different ways to do it. You could hire one business development rep. Right. You could hire a half-time resource from an agency that would do, outbound calling on your behalf and be the one who would follow up on all the leads you're starting to generate. You can, I know lots of MSPs that are having pretty good success with inside sales resources from the Philippines.
Right.
There's a lot of offshoring things that have not worked, but there's a lot of cultural affinities, and the English language skills and cultural intuitiveness of people in the Philippines are actually pretty well dialed in for doing inside sales work for the United States. Right. There's a whole host of different ways. So the key theme is crawl, walk, run. But I would say if you're in that 1 to 3 to 4 million stage, you've really got to just start invest $3 in sales for every $1 you do in marketing, not $3 in marketing for every $1 in sales, because you will quickly outstrip the capacity and interest to sell of the CEO or president or owner. And the hardest part is really building a professional sales organization under the principles. So anyway, so that's one I think that's a world I've lived through. And had clients who have gone through that journey, and every day it's probably it's a struggle. In the business that I'm building today, it's a lot harder to cultivate and develop a professional sales team than it is to crack the code on marketing, I would say. Right.
And one before the other. So I was laughing earlier at your example of just throwing 150K at Google Ads, and I've been in that position where I've kind of been told that this is what we're doing, and just throwing stuff, and why write checks to those guys when it's not in your interest. So again, to get back to the car metaphor, finally at last for me, hooray! Don't put a Ferrari engine in a Fiat, right? Don't do that first and dump that in without scaling congruently, without building that capacity. We all talk about the sales and marketing funnel and how beautiful the funnel is and how you can make things really predictable and reliable. But when the throughput at the bottom of the funnel isn't enough and you're just dumping in stuff at the top, it's going to overflow. It's all going to spill to the ground, to your point. And it will not function the way that you think it will when you don't scale congruently and really start from the bottom up. And I love the example. I'm not sure if you'd be the same way that I would, but this idea of starting with sales, I love to start with the sales conversation and marketing. What is the conversation we want to have with that triple checking your ICP? Who is the actual type of company we really want to talk to because we win with them? what's that conversation that they want to have around data, around scalability for the business, around peace of mind, and then how do we move that and scale that up funnel in the sense of thought leadership. A salesperson cannot talk to every single person at all times of the day, and so whatever present digital content or meetings that you can go to, or word of mouth or referrals, what kind of conversation that you want to have and thought leadership that you want to drive to that conversation, can you scale? And then everything feels congruent. And when you have the manpower to be able to handle the sales demand on that, then you can go out and scale. Absolutely love it.
And Bryce, I love the point you're making there, which is start with these sales conversations and then think content, because that's the other problem. That's the other pitfall I see when MSPs really start to heavily invest in marketing, is they start investing in media, in buying advertising dollars and buying clicks and buying eyeballs. And then you kind of like, open the kimono and you're like, hey, there's no content there. Like you drove people to your website and there's no blogs, there's no white papers, there's no webinar program, there's no content, right? So the other thing to think about as you're scaling, if you're kind of mastered a couple of those steps with sales, you have a process, you have growing capacity on the sales front, then think content.
Right.
We already talked about content earlier in the conversation, but like you really, like, the marketing engine needs like a fairly nice pile of content before you actually start going and putting some wood behind it to get eyeballs to it. And it's hard. It's hard if you've created, 30 blog posts, or you have 5 white papers and you've got, a webinar program that happens 6 times a year. It can feel demoralizing when you look at some of the readership or the attendance numbers on some of these things. So I've been there, right? Like that can feel demoralizing, but if you're first creating the content and then you're obsessing over how to get more eyeballs to the content, you're doing it in the right order.
That's
and
exactly.
You can keep at it, because what you'll see over time with persistence is you look back and go, holy crap, we used to only get 10 people to come to our webinars, and now we're getting 40 pretty consistently 3 years later. And then that's a moment of like pure joy, I would say, if you've really been at the marketing craft for a while.
Absolutely. It will work out if you know the right fit for your company with your ICP that you've triple checked, and if you have the right content that solves if you have the empathy to go out there and ask and learn what their true pain points are, and you have the content to exactly address that, it will get eyeballs. Could you get a bit more savvy of how you find them and what you do, obviously, but you're doing things in the right order from the ground up, to your point, rather than just the top down of like, let's throw money at the problem and sort that way. Absolutely love that. If I could not switch gears, but kind of drive the conversation a bit more to the people side of things. We've talked a lot about strategies, about mentality, about activities, and how you want to, division of labor, how you want to do things. What do you look for when you're hiring that first salesperson, that first appointment setter, that first marketing person? What are some of the qualities? When you pick one that you want, that first step up that an MSP is likely to make to really scale their sales and marketing. What are the qualities you look for, and how do you find that right person?
This is a tough one. This is a tough one. I would say I won't kind of reveal all the scar tissue I have on it. But I think where we are today is wow. Okay. Where do I? So here's what I would say is that in our opinion, the best kind of sales resource you could hire in your local market is what we would call kind of a full cycle account executive. Okay. And when we say full cycle, that means somebody who not only does business development and sources new demand, or receives demand and cultivates local business relationships, but also has the sophistication to actually close a managed services sale, or collaborate very closely with the CEO or president on closing the sale. That's what we mean by full cycle AE. And why is that somewhat unique? I mean, people might say, "Oh, he's a hunter." Well, I guess the point is like, I think we've tried to like kind of split that into 2 roles, where you've got kind of like business development reps who spend all of their, like 95% of their time on the phones. And then you have account executives who kind of receive that demand. And all I'll say is that model is probably very similar to that's something we did at Axcient very successfully. We had a 15-person business development team.
B2B SaaS, whole different world,
SaaS,
whole different
B2B
animal.
SaaS, that works up there. Yep. And it works, and it probably works for MSPs that are in that kind of 30, 40, 50, $100 million range, where you now have like 10 outside account executives and you need like a team of 5 business development reps or 10 business development reps who are hammering the phones across a broad geography all the time. But if you're talking like an MSP that's in the 1 to 5 million range in a local city, you want a full cycle AE. And that person's going to probably cost you anywhere from, if they're on target, $70,000 to $110,000 a year. And when they're on target. And that person, the reason I say full cycle is they have to be able to pick up the phone and hammer the phones for a campaign, or to drive some audience for a webinar, or to promote your upcoming lunch and learn, or that sort of thing. But really, you want like half of their time out doing that local center of influence work that we talked about earlier in the call.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And what you don't want is you don't want an account executive who maybe spent a couple of years at a B2B SaaS software company who sits around waiting for other people to generate demand for them and deliver them appointments. You do not want that. I've been there, and an account you do not want to hire an account executive who's waiting for somebody else to deliver them appointments or generate demand. They have to be somebody who is excited about going out to the chamber event, going out to the EO trade show or the Vistage trade show, to go out to do local networking in the community. They have to be excited and energized by that. They probably need to be pretty much, technically speaking, an extrovert, because they have to gain energy from doing that work. If it's draining for them, they won't do it.
That's right.
But you got to think about, like, the hardest thing in MSP marketing today is getting first-time conversations with business decision makers.
Right.
The sale itself is also very complex and hard, but the biggest deficit everybody has is, I'm not getting enough at bats. I'm not getting enough first-time appointments.
That's right.
And so that full cycle AE is super critical from a model perspective in terms of how what's their mission. So anyway, that's what I would say on that sales front, and the people who you're looking for. And it also means you're probably hiring somebody who's more seasoned. We're talking 7 to 10 to 15 years of experience. I mean, somebody who did like uniform sales, like literally, like the local uniform companies for 5 or 10 years.
They know the companies.
They know how to do B2B business development and B2B sales in a local market. Like anything B2B oriented where they have experience, you're not going to find a lot of MSP salespeople. So you're going to have to look to other industries. Right. But if they were doing B2B, if there was a certain significant outside dimension to it, and it's even a plus, a big bonus if they also were handling a complex sale.
Amazing.
That's a bonus.
It's great. Transferable skills. I love that. Normally at this point, we jump to the rapid fire questions. We have a question from Benjamin, and I wanted to get to our call to action. We'd like to end by the end of that. I mean, Ted, this is amazing. We got to have you back on. This is like, we could talk for hours, obviously, as you can see how animated I am. But just to be respectful of people's time and their appointments, and hopefully the sales calls they have coming up here at the top of the hour, closing new business and everything. Just one more quick question, and we'll have some kind of routes for how people can get in touch with you. Benjamin's asking thoughts on cold call emails and visits to vetted ICPs.
You have to have cold outreach as a component of what you do. Cold LinkedIn, cold email. At SnapTech, we subscribe to ZoomInfo. We have 3 verticals that are like our prime verticals. We're fairly scientific in how we arm our business development folks and AEs with lists, using ZoomInfo. That stuff works. And then, but I think the most important thing to think about is it's it's better when you have it's paired up with your marketing strategy. Like just doing cold outreach to, like, let me just say two things about cold outreach. Where you want to invest the bulk of your time is you want an excuse to call that's something other than will you get into an appointment with me, because you're kind of like you're trying to like go to like the third or fourth date rather than the first date. The first date is somebody comes to your webinar. The first date is somebody comes to your lunch and learn. The first date is somebody reads your white paper, your blog. That's the first date. So one part of having a business development team and reaching out cold is it is a very effective way at getting your content in front of the right eyeballs and decision makers, number one. Number two, you've got to remember that a huge part of cold outreach is you're doing discovery. Like even if you reach the gatekeeper and they say, so-and-so is not here. And you say, well, are they the one who looks after IT? Oh, well, no, actually, Cindy's the one who looks after IT. Oh, Cindy, what's Cindy's title? What's Cindy's last name? Or are you using an outsourced, are you outsourcing to an MSP, or is Cindy the director of IT? You know, like every call you make needs to be a data gathering call, a discovery call where you're gathering more information. And if you're doing both of those things, using the cold outreach as a way to drive your marketing program, and you're using it as a way to cultivate discovery and building what we call a warm 250 for your market, like 250 accounts that you know everything about, that you're going to cultivate, then you can do cold.
Love it. Yeah. And I guess the physical visiting places is just an ROI discussion of how much time, boots in the ground, pound the pavement versus time in the office, and follows the same principle. Like you have to be out there and you have to be meeting people. And
canvassing can work, but again, it's like if you're using canvassing to try to like barge into somebody's office, it ain't going to work. If you're using Canvas as a way to find friendly gatekeepers who are going to give you some information, canvassing can work as well.
Right. So your expectations accordingly. Ted, this has been incredible. What's your favorite karaoke song, by the way?
My favorite karaoke, I go to outlaw country. So Johnny Cash, Merle Haggard.
Love it.
Yeah, my dad was from Bakersfield, California. So, we got some old school country in the blood. So
great. We provided so much value. We didn't have time for the full list of quick fire questions and all the hot takes, but we got that one in, and you're on record. Awesome choice. Always a Johnny Cash fan. Great. So just in the interest of time, we'd love to wrap up. You've said if people want to follow you and learn more, there's a ton of questions, there's a ton of interest. They can look you up on LinkedIn and get in touch, right?
Yeah. So we talked about Robert being a go-giver earlier in the call, and I want to be a go-giver. It's something I'm passionate about. It's why I'm here today, to share some knowledge with the industry and the marketplace and people I get to meet out here. So look me up on LinkedIn and reach out. If you've got a burning question, happy to hop on a call and engage and help out however I can.
Excellent. Some of us will see you at IT Nation Evolve in Denver coming up. I'm kind of covering other parts of the country. And so at the Axcient.com in the resources section, you can view our events, and we're everywhere all the time trying to be. So I'll be on the road at Robin Robbins here in a couple of days. I'll be at ChannelCon later this month. Exchange is a big event for us. There's other folks blocking, tackling on Evolve and many, many other events, and you can find us. I want to plug our MSP Xperience Summit. So that's our virtual summit. It's absolutely free on October 3rd of this year. I think it's noon, maybe Mountain, noon and later. It's a 3-4 hour virtual event that's completely free. Isabel is going to drop the link for everybody. We'll be promoting the heck out of it. And we're going to have some amazing folks like Robert Jaffe and many others, our CEO keynote, our product roadmap, tons of BCDR content in that sense of like, we just want folks to be able to master the craft of true BCDR rather than just simple cold data storage and backup, things that can actually be recoverable, can actually solve real world problems around cybercrime and ransomware and human error and things like that. And that's all available free for you on October 3rd at the MSP Xperience Virtual Summit. So we do have a roundtable next week for partners. That's available in our Facebook community page. If you're a partner, Robert Jaffe and I will be doing an Ask Me Anything version. So we have a lot of interest in that. Should be kind of spicy. Just ask them absolutely anything about being an MSP owner, going through a massive cyber attack, being a longtime Axcient partner, and completely unfiltered. Look forward to that. Ted, this has been an incredible conversation. Have to have you back, obviously and completely. And we'll get to, more interesting, like dogs or cats questions. Dogs or cats for you? What's your favorite?
Dogs.
Oh, dogs. Okay, great. All right, we covered that off too. So thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate it. You're such a go-giver. Love it.
All right. It's great to be here.
Thanks, Seth. Thanks. All right. Bye-bye.